My name is Perry Hoffman, and I am president and co-founder of the National Education Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorder. It's now my deepest pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Marsha Linehan. Dr. Linehan is a professor of psychology at the University of Washington, and I think it would be fair to say that she revolutionized the disorder with her treatment dialectical behavior therapy. There are many thousands, millions perhaps of lives who've been changed because of dialectical behavior therapy, and many families also whose lives have been changed because now their loved ones have their lives back and are moving forward in their lives. I think it's also probably fair to say that Marsha is the only person in the psychiatric community, just like Oprah, that when you say Marsha, everybody knows.
Well, I want to thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. It's so exciting for me because I knew Perry way back when I did my very first training, dialectical behavior therapy at Duke University and Cornell. And then Alan is my student, so this is really quite a pleasure. And to see what you all have done is so impressive. It's so impressive. Well, I started my I didn't know I was going to give a talk, by the way, so I'm just going to ramble. but I thought I'd at least tell you how DBT came to be, because if nothing else, it was the first study that was done. And I started because my real, actual field is suicide. And I wanted, mainly because I wanted to treat the people whose lives were so terrible they wanted to be dead. So I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So I wanted to treat suicide, but since I'm a scientist and I wanted to do a research trial, I was a behavior therapist, and believe me, no one believed in behavior therapy more than me. So I figured that I would just get a bunch of suicidal people and show that behavior therapy worked. So, but I was worried that I might not be able to show it, so I thought, well, I better get people who are really suicidal. So I called all the hospitals in town, and I said, send me the worst. I want people who really try to kill themselves a lot, so I can show that I get them to stop trying to kill themselves or go down. So I said, okay, so they sent all these people in. I had no idea what I was doing. So the first thing that happened was the therapy was a catastrophic event. Mainly because behavior therapy is a technology of change. And it's very good as a technology of change with a person who's not terribly sensitive to being told that they need to change. But I had a group of people who I began to realize were incredibly sensitive to the fact that I was telling them that they should change. So as the treatment blew up, I started modifying behavior therapy. And fortunately, I had a team. I had a psychiatrist who was a colleague of mine who was working on my research, and a bunch of my graduate students, and they would watch me through the mirror. And I would go in and treat someone, and then I'd come out, and they'd say, more of this, don't do any more of that, none of that, none of that. I said, okay, more of the good, less of the bad. And we figured out, I think, what was good and what was bad by whether the client quit talking, attacked me, walked out, or hid behind the chair. And I had never heard of borderline personality disorder at that point in my life. And I wrote an entire manual treating borderline personality disorder without knowing that's what I was treating. And then I had managed to get funding from the National Institute of Mental Health. They later told me that they really didn't give it to me because I was good. They gave it to me because they thought I was so passionate that if anybody could do it, probably I would be able to. And so that's how I got the money. And the National Institute of Mental Health, by the way, in those old days, you know, you could go and they really helped you. And you could go and you could talk to them and they'd rewrite your grant and tell you everything that was wrong with it, and you'd go rewrite it again, you could go back, you could have all these conversations, and it was really this unbelievably collaborative sort of event. And I owe an enormous amount of credit to the National Institute of Mental Health, who really taught me most of what I know about research. And so they gave me the funding. And so it was in this process that the treatment got developed. I did a randomized clinical trial, finally, funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, and went to publish it. had it turned down and told that I should never resubmit again because I wasn't worth being published in psychiatry journals because I didn't know how to write. And I said, well, how about if I learn to write? How about if I get someone else to edit it? How about that? And they finally said, okay, we want to know the names of the people that read it because we don't want to waste our time anymore on your research. And so I sent it in, of course, and then I knew it was like being a bobo doll. You know, if you go down and you come right back up again, they pay attention. So when it got published, I wanted it published in psychiatry because I knew that only psychiatrists really cared about these people at that time because they were always in the hospital or the emergency room, so psychiatrists really cared. But outpatient therapists didn't care because they wouldn't treat them. And people won't treat suicidal people, and they often won't treat, as I'm sure all of you all know, people who meet criteria for borderline personality disorder. By this time, of course, I knew that they met criteria for borderline personality disorder. And so DBT, dialectical behavior therapy for short, called DBT, the reason it was called dialectical is because it's the synthesis of acceptance and change. And having all the change technology in the world doesn't help you if you can't radically accept the person in front of you. And if they don't feel radically accepted, so that they can take the change strategies that you have to help them. And that's how it got its name, is because it's a synthesis of change and radical acceptance meaning complete and total acceptance, both of the person and of the person trying to help them. Because the person trying to help them has to accept also your complete inability to help them right away, to help them in time, to get them out of hell in any reasonable amount of time. And therapists have to be able to tolerate their inability. Just like you, most of you in here who are parents, have to also tolerate your inability to save right away, in time, these suffering people. And so that's where the acceptance came from. I want to just make a slight comment about research. I keep hearing all this about the failure, the fact that NIMH doesn't spend a lot of money on borderline personality research, but I do want to tell you that one of the major problems is we don't have a field of researchers submitting grants that are fundable. I have spent a lot of time trying to develop strategic planning meetings at the University of Washington where I bring in all the DBT people in the world doing research. I bring them into the University of Washington once a year, and we're now inviting all the people who've got other treatments that are also effective to try to come in so that we can develop a collaborative, non-competitive research community who will really try together to go forward. And we had our 10th year meeting this year. But trying to find all the researchers in the world researching this who are doing good, high quality science is not easy. There are not loads of us out there because it's not taught in graduate schools. And if you don't teach in graduate schools, then you don't end up with young students who go out wanting to do this kind of research. And the field is like 10 times worse than suicide, where for many years I was the only suicide researcher in the United States, treatment researcher in the United States. I mean, that's really stunning, when you look at the rates of suicide in this country, in the world. And I finally started a strategic planning group for them too, when I sat next to someone who said he was writing a book on suicide treatment. And I said, really, what data do you have? I didn't even know there was data. What is the data? He said, well, I don't have any data. And I said, well, why don't you have any data? And he said, well, I haven't done a study. And I said, well, do a study. And he said, well, I don't know how to do a study. And I said, well, come to the University of Washington. I'll teach you how to do a study. And by the end of the dinner, the whole table was coming. And now we have our suicide strategic planning meeting too, where we bring young people in and experts. And everyone pays their own way, and they have to promise to do the dishes at my house. And I even now finally put it on the schedule, 9 o'clock, wash dishes. So, but, we want to disseminate through family connections, which I'm so proud of, really I am. I am so proud of it, really, you all. So I am. It's just so wonderful.